Well, welcome. It's hard to say how busy our representative has been, but I'm sure he'll tell us a little bit about what's keeping him in Boston and fighting for us. It always seems that COVID says everything's slowing down, but from what I understand, not at Beacon Hill. So why don't we start with an intro in case there is somebody out there, Brian, who doesn't know you?
Al, thank you for having me on the show. It's nice to have periodic chats. I don't get to talk to you as much anymore at the FinCom meetings or at town hall, so it's always nice to see you. And yeah, representative for the 10th Worcester District, which comprises the towns of Milford, Hopedale, Mendon, and Precinct 1 of Medway.
Yeah, I still want to make a trade someday. Can't we trade off like a street so we get two representatives working for us?
Well, I mean, it's funny you should mention that because one of the things I did this week was meet with the chair of the redistricting committee, and that's going on right now because the census figures came in, as you know. So, by statute, the legislature is now obligated to redraw districts, and the targeted number is about 43,000 people per House district. And my meeting with the chair, which I believe was, oh goodness, I think that was yesterday. The projected numbers for me in the existing district is just a little bit over that, about 500 to 600 over that. So, I think that the 10th Worcester district is safe to stay as it is. I don't want to jinx anything, but we didn't have any kind of change in numbers that's really going to cause something to get drawn up, and that's important. And I stressed to the chair that it's very, very important to keep Milford, Hopedale, Mendon whole. I think it is important for communities to be together. Medway, it's a unique situation. There are two representatives, and that has its pluses and its minuses. But I really think that particularly a town like Milford really needs to be whole. So that's another process that's going on right now, and there are a lot of different variations on that. Population left the state in the western part of the state. Population gained in and around Boston, Nantucket. That's going to affect the congressional districts. It may affect us in terms of Congressman Auchincloss. It's certainly going to affect Mendon with Congressman McGovern. So those are a lot of things that we're going to see happen over the next few months.
Did it surprise you that we netted a positive flow of people into Massachusetts?
Um, no, I don't think so. And I'm just trying to think for a second. I think the increase was 7%, 7.4%, something like that. I think my district increased accordingly, pretty much along those numbers. Um, Maybe a little bit less than that. Now I'm just getting a little confused with Worcester County. I think Worcester County progressed, and I think my 10th Worcester district grew at a little bit slower pace. But yeah, no, we had a good influx of people in Massachusetts, which is very important to keep our 9 congressional seats, which is very, very important in Congress. But it's interesting to see how the movements of people change. I don't think I would have expected the population in Western Mass to fall as it did. And I hadn't really thought that as many people went urban around Boston as they did. But that's how the numbers have come down.
It's surprising. I mean, it's much better than 10 years ago losing a seat.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And you know it better than we do, but when you lose a vote in Congress, I mean, that can affect it. So you get a little more aid going out to a square state instead of to us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's very, very important. It's electoral votes. It's votes in Congress. It's huge. And you remember, we've had a few congressmen. At one point, we were the Eastern tail on Representative Neal's district.
Richie had the Banana Republic.
That's
It
right.
was a long,
Yeah.
thin banana.
Yes, yes. You know, starting in Springfield area, and now we've got kind of a different type of a shape. Heading more towards Newton, Brookline, with Congressman Auchincloss in that district. But I think that the congressional districts are going to change. I don't think they're going to have anybody have to run against each other, but I think the territories will change in the 9 districts.
Is that healthy, Brian? I mean, I think about you. You've had a number of years learning about, the towns and the street in Medway that you cover. But you've had a number of years to understand it, get to know the people, and all of a sudden they say, "Well, we're going to trade Mendon for a future draft pick."
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I really like my district. I like the towns I have, and I feel very comfortable with it. I think the House of Representatives generally, we're known to be the best purveyors of our own district. We really kind of know our towns the best. I would think even the governor, the administration realize that. That's why a lot of the programs and issues that they have, they funnel down towards us, questions that they have, because we have the most direct contact with the town. So, yeah, when you change, I mean, if it has to happen, it has to happen. But it does, put you a little bit. I would imagine it would, put you at a little bit of a disadvantage, at least for a while, to get up to speed with the issues of that particular community. Sure.
Now, when you say 43,000, I mean, Milford's got 28, 29,000 people by itself. How does that, is it just total population or?
Yes, not registered voters, total numbers. And Milford's unofficial numbers, or because it's still an estimate until the actual census numbers come in. Um, the census was delayed last year, as you know, which has kind of prolonged everything. But we jumped, I think, from 27,000 to close to 30,000.
I'll bet if you really counted all the heads, we're probably at 33 or so.
I would think so, sure. Sure, because I always felt, when I was a selectman and we were back at, 26, 27,000, we were at least 30,000. I
Right.
thought for sure. Yeah.
So now the biggest thing still on the news and in our lives is COVID. Now you've taken on a new role though for public health, right?
Yes, I have been assigned as the vice chair of the Joint Committee on Public Health, Representative Margie Decker, who's from Cambridge. She is the chairwoman. And I think it's going to be, well, first of all, it's very timely, obviously, with what's going on, not only in the state, but throughout the country. But Chair Decker herself is very energetic and very committed, and I think is going to have a very aggressive schedule. We've already had a full hearing on close to 50 bills. That was on Monday, and we're one of the few committees that have gotten out of the box already with public hearings, and it was all done virtual. So it's going to be a busy, busy time for public health, no question.
But now your committee that you're the vice chair of, what does it really cover? What kind of topics are you looking at?
Well, anything under public health, and let me just think for 1 second. So the hearing that we had Monday was targeted for children's health bills, and I think there were 47 or so bills. We have our next hearing on Monday, and the bills group for that hearing deal with municipal, town health departments and issues like that. So that's how they'll be grouped down. I believe that we have about 350 bills in our committee. I'm not sure, what other topics, how they're going to be grouped. But when you think about, public health, it's the entire gambit, whether it's, tobacco cessation, medical conditions. Like I said, Monday's going to deal with things that you can think about that Jackie Murphy deals with, and the Board of Health in Milford, those kinds of issues. So it's very, very expansive.
But how do you even deal with 300 bills? I mean, there's only 220 days in a year, that are working days. That's a bill and a half a day.
Well, what happens is, the bill will get presented at a public hearing, and oftentimes there's a companion bill, so it might be the same bill, the same language, but two bills, one from the House and one from the Senate. So it'll get put on for a public hearing. All parties that are interested in it have an opportunity to present testimony, information, questions, and then at some point the committee has to deliberate. And really, our scope on the bill is fairly limited, in the sense that you either vote to give it a favorable recommendation to move on in the legislative process. You could vote to give it a negative recommendation where it would not move on and the bill would essentially die at the Public Health Committee level. You could send the bill along with amendments. Changes can be made at the committee level, or you could send the bill to study, which kind of means it's not ready for prime time. There's some more details that need to be worked out on it, and it's something that the sponsor has to kind of go back on and figure out what to do. But for the session, it would be done and probably look to change in the next legislative session.
So when you talk about 40 bills dealing with kids, what kind of issues are you trying to deal with?
Um, Two of the major bills that I think dominated a lot of the attention on Monday. One was to require the chief medical examiner to perform autopsies on children who die, who get killed, and believe it or not, that's not a legal requirement, and the chief medical examiner, in some instances, in fact, a fair degree of instances, has declined to do that, leaving the work to be done for assistant, less experienced medical examiners. And these kinds of cases have consequences, particularly when there's criminal actions. One of the folks who testified was the mother of Matthew Eapen, and I don't know if you recall this. This was the nanny case. Louise Woodward was accused of striking the young child and shaking it. There was a criminal matter, and she did get convicted, but the judge reduced the stay. And what was explained to us was one of the problems in that case was that the inexperienced medical examiner had come forth with an opinion of blunt trauma, death. And then once the defense lawyers got involved on behalf of Woodward, there was a lot of pressure, a lot of lobbying, and the medical examiner changed the cause of death, which created a lot of uncertainty in the case. There was another similar situation, and the names escape me right now. It was more recent, and in that one, the situation was so problematic that they could not go forward with the prosecution against the nanny. So it's a very serious issue, albeit limited in scope, thank goodness. But there was some very moving, really heart-wrenching testimony, because these folks have gone through so much, and you would be surprised at how much they open up of themselves on these issues at these public hearings. So that bill was actually filed by Chair Decker, and she feels very strongly that in cases involving small children, the chief medical examiner, who is the most experienced in the state, ought to be passing judgment on the cause of death.
Well, that only makes sense, doesn't it?
Well, we think so, but it's discretionary right now, and the chief medical examiner has opted not to get involved when she doesn't feel like she would like to get involved. So we think that if she's not going to step forward and what we think is do the right thing voluntarily, then that's why you have to pass legislation.
And now, is the chief medical examiner an appointed or an elected position?
I believe it's appointed through the administration because I think that the governor, part of the what came out in the testimony, and to be honest with you, I really didn't have any familiarity or any background with this particular issue. But it was said during the testimony that the governor could mandate this, but because that's not happening, that's the reason for the legislation.
Yeah, it just doesn't sound right that, you know, can't be anything worse for a parent than burying their child. And then not to step forward and say, I could make a difference doing my job. I guess I don't understand what the rationale would be that I'm going to pass it. It's not a memo to be typed or something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I haven't had conversation with the chief medical examiner. I know Chair Decker has, and obviously it wasn't successful. I think the feeling was that assistance exists for a reason, and she's not going to undercut her assistance. But when there's a track record of assistants being inexperienced and actually changing opinions after a degree of time, that's something that I think needs to be addressed. So that was a very, very moving bill, and that was only one of about 50. And another one that took up a lot of testimony, and I'm not going to be able to articulate the name of the genetic illness, but it's a very serious illness, and there's no legal requirement right now for any testing to be done prenatally, and children who are born with this disease have very, very serious physical defects and issues, and don't oftentimes die at a very young age. So we heard from a number of parents who have been affected by this, and this bill would not only provide prenatal education, treatment, but also testing so that folks could realize just exactly whether or not this genetic condition is going to occur. And if so, I think there is some early treatment available. And it has a very long name, and I was not familiar with the disease, but that was also a very, very emotional bill that we heard testimony on as well.
Wow. I mean, I can't imagine that anybody would vote against testing.
Yeah.
I mean, the treatment, I took a medical ethics course and it was always, okay, how do you justify saving one person at $165,000 a year, for like some of the genzymes, the Pompe's, the Gaucher's disease, versus putting that into the inner city and having, be able to save thousands. I guess the only thing I could think of is if it was my child, I don't know that I could look at it rationally.
Yeah, no, and in this particular instance, I don't think that there's a great deal of expense here. It's just getting this particular medical condition, on the radar screen to be accepted in the medical community and to be part of the birthing process. But there are ways also that I think women who might be susceptible to it can mitigate the causes, and that's the education prong that is part of the bill to try to work with OBGYNs and really get information out to women for that. So it's those kinds of bills that we heard on Monday.
So now when you go through and you recommend a bill, Do you have to recommend the funding source?
Um, no, not at this level. So as the bill progresses through the legislative process, I mean, I think that's something that, gets taken into consideration at our level, but not primarily. The last stop before the House floor is Ways and Means, which would be similar to the Finance Committee, and that's where the funding gets taken into consideration.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of Vertex's treatment for hepatitis, it's amazing, 80 grand. It's not a therapeutic, it's actually a treatment. You pay it once, you're done. But then it became a budget breaker for a lot of states when they figured out how many people
Sure.
would need to be treated.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the analysis that gets done, later on, just to see what the budgetary impact might be. And, some bills die at Ways and Means because of that. And some bills become part of the budget. So, there's a lot of different roads that these bills can travel. And, the process, and it's difficult to try to explain. It's certainly confusing for people to think about, but the process to get a bill passed is very difficult.
Why don't you take a minute or two, explain to us? Brian Murray has an idea. How does Brian Murray make that into a law?
Well, let's see. Let's focus on something real. So we have the Walden Woods condominium in Milford, right? And you're familiar with that project. And as part of that, when the town was involved in the permitting and the real estate, there was a chunk of land that was put under conservation restriction. I think about 185 acres, something like that. And the developer wanted to convey two quarries along with that. And the town at that time said, no, we did not want to accept the quarries. So the condominium now owns those quarries, and those are dangerous. There's been at least two deaths recently. I shouldn't say recently. Over the last 10, 15 years, there were two drownings there. Um, it's a liability factor for the condominium. I've met with them. I think with different trustees. I think at least once each of my three terms, and looking for a possible solution. They're at the point now where insurance companies won't even insure them. So the way that we're trying to do something for them is twofold. Working with the DEP to see whether or not there's a program available with reclaimable soil to fill the quarries, and to your point, what I've done is I've filed a bill that would limit the liability of quarry owners to $100,000. So God forbid if someone did drown, and there was a legal action, they would still have to prove negligence, which is not easy to do, and in fact did not occur in the two drownings that happened. But there would be a cap, there would be a limit, similar to if someone tries to sue a municipality. There's a cap of $100,000 for any negligence action. So I came up with this idea to limit the liability to $100,000. I didn't know exactly how that should be worded. So we have House Counsel, which is similar to Town Council for Milford, and communicated that idea to House Counsel. And we kicked it around a little bit, and came back with language proposed for a bill. And now I have to refile it with the language. So that's the idea that hopefully is going to get put down as a possible bill, which would then go through the legislative process. The bill would get sent probably to the Committee on the Judiciary for a public hearing, and would find out who might be in favor of it, who might be against it, and it may progress on. So that's something that's kind of in the works to try to help the folks that live at Walden Woods.
So now, if the House goes through it and says, we want to propose this, Now it has to go to the Senate.
Yeah, so the House would the House would pass the bill, enact the bill. Then it would go to the Senate. The Senate would have to enact the bill. Then it comes back to the House for what they call engrossment. Goes back to the Senate for engrossment, and then it's ready to be signed by the governor.
Now, you see a lot of bills that have many co-sponsors.
Yes.
What's the advantage to a rep co-sponsoring it? Is if you get a lot of people co-sponsoring it, is there a better chance of passing?
Well, that's the feeling, as you walk into a committee, it's nice to say, hey, look, I've got 90, reps behind me that have signed on in support of this thing. Um, and that's one piece of the puzzle. That in and of itself is not going to get you over the goal line, but it's another factor that the committee effect that leadership would take into effect, saying, "Hey, something looks like there's a lot of support for this thing. We ought to take a look at it." So it's certainly not a guarantee. It's one factor of many that helps passage. For reps to sign on, and I sign on. We all sign on to a number of bills. I sign on to bills that first of all, the constituents ask me to sign on to that I might not be aware of, because we get probably about 7,000 bills in any one session. Um, and if I think the bill makes sense and it's a good bill and a constituent asks me to do it, absolutely, I'll be glad to co-sponsor it. We get requests to co-sponsor from advocacy groups. A lot of environmental groups are looking for support on particular bills. I'm glad to support those. So any type of bill that a rep thinks is a good idea and would make good law, we can sign on as a co-sponsor to show our support for it.
But that's 30 bills a day.
Well, yeah.
I mean, 7,000 divided by 200 days. Do you have to have an army of mini Murrays to go through all this?
Yeah, no, I don't have an army of many. I have one young lady who's a legislative aide for me, and she kind of helps coordinating meetings. We had a Zoom today with an educational group actually that's actually doing some work with Milford, which is nice. But of that 7,000, a small percentage actually find their way into law.
No, I'm just saying, just looking at 7,000 reports could be a full-time job.
Well, it is, and that's where the committee work comes into effect. So, for example, a committee that I'm not on, say transportation, well, I'm not really familiar with those bills in transportation, as I would be with public health, for example. So we each kind of have our own responsibilities, and as bills willow through the process and get closer to passage by the full body, obviously you're aware of those, and those are some of the major bills, many of which we passed last session: transportation, climate, police reform. There are a number of big bills that were passed last session. So you don't really get too into them until they kind of take shape, and it looks like it's going to come for a full a floor vote.
Staying on health, COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I suffer from the fact that I listen to Fox News when I leave the garage, and halfway to work, I flip to CNN, and I'm hearing either that the COVID epidemic is gone or going away, or we're still in the hot end of it.
I think when you go out and about, it looks like people have had it. People are, to me personally, I think people are ready to bust out. I think that the economy is just gonna take off and really fast. People are gonna look to get out to go to restaurants, bars, shows, go to stores. I mean, I really think that people are really just getting ready to have a lot of action. Obviously, the vaccine, which started out a little rough in Massachusetts, and in a very short time, we became one of the leaders in the country in terms of distributing the vaccine. I think that's led to a lot of calming people's anxieties about getting out and about. Milford, I've got to say, and I say it wherever I am, I'm very proud of Milford with our Board of Health and our health director. I think that really the town is a model for municipalities on how things get handled. Um, the regional vaccination site in Uxbridge, that wasn't going to happen unless Milford came on board. And they did. We signed on, and we're a big part of why that regional vaccination site is here, and that handles a number of smaller towns, as you know. The Sutton, Oxford, Uxbridge, all of those towns west. But the key to that was Milford, and the administration clearly said if Milford's not a part of it, it ain't happening. Well, Dr. Murphy, Jackie Murphy, made sure that Milford was part of that, and I think that that's been a big, big benefit.
Well, I think overall, I mean, we joke about the Little Red Hospital when we grew up, and that a lot of people don't know that most of the people who were born in Milford can trace themselves back to one of four physicians. When you think of the Cicchettis, the Mastriani, I mean, you go through the four names.
Dr. Capisi.
Capisi, that was mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you go through now today, we have an incredible world-class medical center. And
And I think the key is that Milford Regional, as far as a community hospital, and several other community hospitals in the state and across the country have struggled. But I think the key to Milford Regional is they did not stay stagnant, and they affiliated. And they affiliated with more than one institution. They're affiliated with UMass Memorial. They're affiliated with Brigham and Women's. They're affiliated with Dana-Farber. I mean, when they're affiliated with Children's Hospital. So when you affiliate with medical institutions like that, and you can share the expertise, you can share the treatment, the really just kind of the knowledge, that means that you're growing. You're not staying stagnant. You're not in one place. You're certainly not going backwards. You're evolving, and I'm sure we all know someone who's used the Dana-Farber site in Milford. That's been literally a lifesaver. So that's been, I think, the key to Milford Regional success.
well, I'm amazed and so indebted to them because I had a bit of a nuisance 2 years ago where I went in and all of a sudden an hour and a half later, I'm on a table at the Brigham to have open heart surgery. You know, it just amazed me how efficient they were and how quickly they got me in. I mean, I didn't even register. They just had me wheeled right in, and you hope that nobody has to go through a nuisance like I did. But, it was helpful that Milford Hospital, Milford Regional, knew what to do, how to do it, and they knew what not to do.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you see $10 million investment by a major hospital in Boston to give us another accelerator. And it's like when you think there's 13 in the state and we're getting two, it really makes you feel good.
Yeah, yeah, and you can see, that whole area now, Al. Main Street, Route 140, with the intersection work, the highway work that's being done, and I think we could see this years ago. I mean, I envision that whole area is really going to develop in kind of like a medical mecca, where you're going to see some commercial buildings open up that are going to be ancillary or complementary to Milford Regional, whether they're medical supply places, whether they're doctors' offices, whether they're restaurants for staff to go get something to eat at, but it's going to really, I think, kind of develop into, just an entire support for that Milford Regional facility, which is, is our largest employer. And that's
Yeah.
very,
Well, I mean, think about Easy Way Car Wash, now a medical building. The no-name gas station that only took cash and had the cheapest rates, now a medical center.
yeah, yeah,
You know, it's growing. It reminds me of Longwood.
yes, exactly.
And the greatest thing for me is seeing the opportunities for Milford people that
Yeah,
they can go to work at these medical facilities, make good money. Certainly a lot more than when I started at my blazing $18 or 18,000 a year. I mean,
yeah,
these are really good paying jobs.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So what do you think is going to happen now in the short term with COVID? Any opinion?
Well, I mean, it seems as though, the vaccination distribution is starting to round out. Some of these massive sites are scheduled to be closing. So obviously, anybody who wants to get a vaccine can get it. I think that's going to be huge. The governor's already issued his timeline for easing a lot of the restrictions, which is very, very soon. That's going to allow these businesses to open back up, and people to really kind of get out and about, and I think really hopefully get back to life as we knew it to a degree. I mean, I think there's always going to be changes when you come out of something as life changing as this. I think the remote, I think what we're doing right now, this is here to stay. Maybe not on 100% basis everywhere, but it's certainly something that businesses, maybe schools, will utilize on a part-time basis. So I think we're going to see changes in our lifestyle, but clearly, I think the worst is behind us.
Well, I mean, I think what you're saying is profound in that. Think about the seatbelt law. When we were kids, my first car, a 65 Malibu, first thing I did is push the seatbelts in between the two foam pieces, the chairs.
Yep, yep,
And then all of a sudden, children came. And now you had to wear your seatbelts because you'd be called a hypocrite if you didn't. Well,
yep,
now I find myself, even when I'm alone, it's Pavlovian. I get in the car, I put the seatbelt on.
sure.
So I think things like washing your hands. When Mike Newstein, head of infectious diseases at the Med Center, came on to talk about H1N1, and I remember asking, saying, Michael, isn't this just about washing my hands a lot? He said, that's probably the majority you could do. And if you told me that we'd all be walking around with masks on, I would have not, I wouldn't laugh in public, but I would never have believed. But yet here we are. And from my understanding, the flu season's going to be a lot milder because of the things we already do.
It has been. It's one of the most mild flu seasons ever, I think. And so I think the things that you're talking about in terms of change of lifestyle, the washing the hands, the wearing the mask, I think it had a big difference. Um, it's a shame that the mask got politicized. I don't know where that came from, why that happened. I think it's very, very unfortunate. But I didn't have a problem wearing a mask. I mean, if that's something that's going to, protect me or maybe protect someone I'm with, if I'm a carrier and I don't know, I don't consider that a problem. Maybe it's an inconvenience, but I certainly don't consider it a sacrifice.
Yeah, and I think it's a shame that it became a Trump, non-Trump political game.
It was awful,
You
awful.
know, I mean, I saw Tony Fauci, good Holy Cross boy, go from hero to villain, depending on whether I'm on CNN or Fox News. And I sit there and shake my head and say, this ought not be about that.
Right, right. Really, it really should not have been. Um, but it is what it is. But I do think, and I know there are a lot of people that were, not happy with the way things happened in Massachusetts. But I really do think that Governor Baker handled things in a very practical, responsible, and realistic manner, really in live time. I mean, this wasn't something he had a chance to study and think about. I mean, things were happening as he was forced to make decisions. And in retrospect, I think I think he did a good job. I really do.
Yeah, and I mean now it's starting to feel a little better. We can go to the Sorrento room again. We
Yeah,
can go to Menden Greenhouse again. As silly as it sounds, there's certain things that have happened to those locations. They ain't going to take them back.
right, right.
And now you see them outside. I just went into Boston because my daughter's moving. My God, the streets have gotten small because every restaurant in the North End seems to have put out tables.
Yep, yep, yep.
Now, we talked about the economy, budget season. Are you done with yet? Or not you, but the royal you?
Yeah, the way the process works, the governor came out with the budget in March. We tackled it. Oh gosh, last week. So Monday through Wednesday, we ran till about 11:30 at night. Monday, we went till about 10:15 Tuesday, and then we finished it up straight through from Wednesday around 11 in the morning till about 2:30, 3 o'clock Thursday morning, and took the final vote on it at that point. Um, so that's generally the way the process works time wise. Now it's off to the Senate. They're passing their rules right now in terms of how to amend it and so forth. They'll finish it up sometime probably before Memorial Day. And then there'll be a conference committee between the House and the Senate to come up with a fully agreed upon budget, which would then get presented to the governor. So, this was the second budget that we did remotely. And, that's good in the sense that I don't have to drive into Boston and try to drive home at 2:30 in the morning, which is not really a safe thing to do. But that's how it works. The downside is you really kind of lose that personal contact, when you're there in the chamber. You can really kind of, talk to everyone and, get a sense about certain things. So you've got to do it by texts or cell calls or whatever. That makes it a little bit, more difficult. But hey, we got through it. And actually this budget I think went very smoothly. I was able to secure $50,000 as an earmark for the Milford Youth Center, which I think is a great program, and I know that'll certainly help.
Yeah, I hear you. 50,000 is exciting, but did I hear something about 4 million coming our way?
Well, that's different. That's on a transportation bond bill. And I was able to get authorization for $4 million for a bond for the Route 109 Beaver Street intersection. And I also got approval for a $2.7 million bond to do over East Main Street and Beaver Street, where I still call it, was the old Pago Pago. Now it's the package store. Rick Villani, town administrator, and Mike Dean, town engineer, were very helpful for me in terms of getting the information, and those projects that they're working on. We voted on that last year, and the governor um, uh, just signed it and passed it this year to allow it. So the bonding is there. That gives it some impetus to work with Mass Highway. They're working on some design plans for the 109 Beaver Street intersection. Um, it's still tough. There's still a lot of things ahead to really kind of get this done. I know one of the major developers involved in this as well. We're talking about two-way on Beaver Street to really open up that industrial corridor for Milford. Um, we're working with Congressman Auchincloss to see if we could, try to target some federal money because it's a very unique area, Al. You've got an intersection between 495 Federal Interstate, Route 109 State Highway, and Beaver Street Local Road. So, there are a lot of balls in play on this. it's a key intersection because of the growth of commercial activity, but also, as I see it, really kind of unlocking the potential of Bear Hill and that industrial zone for Milford. So Senator Fatman was very helpful on this also. He got a corresponding amendment allowed a bond for $4 million also. So that made it, easier to get it through on both sides of the bill, like we had talked about before. So now we're working with Mass Highway to see, how we can kind of push this thing along and, maybe come up with, a federal, state, local, private kind of, collaboration to really, get that intersection really the way it should be.
Well, Brian, I'll disagree with you. I think you're being too modest. Whatever you call it, bond, appropriation, whatever you call it, you're bringing $7 million into our little town.
Well, not until we get it authorized, and we can't get it authorized until we get the plans drawn. So we really got to try to, work with Mass Highway and really kind of, come up with a plan that makes sense. And you know what that means. That means traffic studies, and the big, problem is the queuing off of the off ramp from 495.
195.
But hey, it's a big piece of the puzzle, and now we just kind of keep trying to go forward.
But you got to start sometime. If
Right.
you if you're not fighting and putting all this time and effort in, there's 300 and some odd other towns who would be happy to do it.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I'd rather see it come in, even though you're being humble, well, by you fighting for it and bringing us $7 million of betterment to Milford.
Yeah, I mean that's my job. As far as I'm concerned, my district is first, and that's what I'm there for.
We hear a lot across the country about the negative um, opinion people have of police. I mean, I come back to Milford's had two demonstrations about police, both in favor. We did have one resident, one town meeting member, bring up a motion to defund the police, and I've never heard town hall go so silent. Not even a second could be heard, and it just went away. What's happening on a state level?
Well, what's happening on the state level is we passed a police reform bill last session, and there was some controversy around that, and I think there was some misunderstanding as to really what it was and what it wasn't. So, one of the things that it did was to name an independent commission to through police personnel, develop training standards so that officers have the tools they need to deal with the kinds of situations that you're hearing about, domestic situations, drug related situations, racial situations. The cop of today is a lot different from the cop of 1950. So, a big part of that bill was to get an independent professional commission together. The bill talks about establishing training standards for police, and those have to be put together by police personnel. So the governor and attorney general appointed that commission recently, and that's what they're working towards to develop those kinds of training standards. But you know, you're right. I mean, a lot of this thing, and let's face it, I don't really, regardless of your perspective, defunding the police is just a ridiculous statement. I'm sorry. It doesn't really talk about what the need really is. What the need is that police have to be funded differently. So and again, I think we've talked about this. I really think Milford was on the cutting edge on this long ago by partnering with community impact, because a big part of what police run into that they're not really qualified to deal with are the drug situations. And former Chief O'Laughlin did a wonderful job with Amy Leone, and that's a model for the state to get the drug counselors partnered with the police so that they can learn from each other and they deal with these situations right there. So, when they talk about defunding the police, I would like to think that they really mean, change the funding of police, and make some of that funding for some of the side complementary services that they really need.
Well, you think about it, you've been involved in enough budgets on a local level. If you cut back on the money going to police, first thing that goes away is training. I don't know of any chief that's going to fire an officer if he or she can save them.
Yeah, and because it doesn't make sense because all that does is just increase the overtime portion of the budget. So you're really kind of limited in terms of your personnel moves. But I think really if people could just get away from the emotion and the polarization of the issue, it's really giving the police the tools that they need, whether it's physical tools, Narcan, things like that, or professional tools, folks like community impact. That's how we need that. That's how we're going to improve things.
And I have no issue. I'm sure there's a police officer in Milford that's less than optimal. The odds just say you can't have 100% perfect people. If they do something silly, they should be held accountable. But like you say, to punish all the police, you take somebody off the street, that just puts that much more pressure on the people who are on the street. You know, it doesn't make any sense. And when I think of Milford police and how they've interfaced with the community, you know, Artie on his bike. When I was growing up, if I messed around, and Artie Russo was there, it's like, yeah. And it wasn't fear, it was respect. He was a up and up guy. He would take care of you when you needed it, but you could get the look and the growl if you didn't. You've been involved in a business relief to help the small businesses. What's that about?
Yeah, that was really a partnership, I think, with the governor and the legislature. Ultimately, there's been about $680 million in grant funding through Mass Growth Capital Corporation that's been distributed to about 15,000 small businesses across the state. That money was appropriated through some of the initial federal CARES money, but also a state appropriation that we did last year as part of the economic development bill. And the businesses are all kinds, obviously restaurants, bars, salons, whatever you can think of. And I think it's been a huge boost because businesses took a horrible hit during this pandemic, and many businesses are not going to come back, unfortunately. But we tried to provide as much relief as we could to allow businesses to get through this time period, so that now, hopefully, we can get an economy back that works the way being at work.
Now, did I hear that you shared your name and you went on unemployment or?
That's a whole other ball game. One of the big things that I do, it's every day I get new requests for people with assistance for trying to get their unemployment. The unemployment system has been overrun, not only by demand, but also it's been attacked by hackers with fraud. And people have appropriated other people's names, social security numbers, and have secured benefits. And I was a victim too. I got notified from the Department of Unemployment Assistance that someone had used my social security number and my name and made a claim for unemployment. They were able to flag it initially, and I filed a fraud reporting form, and that stopped it. I don't know where it goes from there. But I've had to file that for a number of constituents too, who some have gotten a 1099, and
Oh, God.
they're like, what is this? I didn't even know. So I've been helping constituents. That's on a daily basis, Al,
Wow.
and it continues. Today, I got probably two new claims every day that there's an issue. But yeah, so I've helped a number of constituents dealing with these fraudulent claims. So, being a victim of one kind of gives me a little bit of assistance and insight.
So you didn't turn around to your better half and say, Emily, did I lose an election I don't know about?
Yeah,
I'm now unemployed.
she got victimized too.
Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah. So fortunately, we flagged it in time, and there's a protocol, and folks that have contacted me, I send them out the contact information. There's a lot of information on there what people can do to help protect themselves. Some people are not computer savvy, so I have filed the fraud report for them.
Now we got a couple minutes left. Climate roadmap. You want to talk to us about that?
Yeah, big bill that was passed last session. The governor vetoed it. We came right back. The new speaker, Ron Mariano, who the heck of a speaker, by the way, didn't back down. He said, "You know something, we're coming right back at him with the same bill." There was some minor tweaks to it, and the governor signed it. So basically, it's really a commitment to increased wind energy. Calling for net emissions, net zero emissions by the year 2050. Department of Energy Resources needs to develop a stretch building code for municipalities to opt into to develop housing and commercial projects that are energy friendly. It's one of the major climate reduction bills in the country, and Massachusetts again is in a leadership position on that.
Well, as we come to the end, I want to thank you. $7 million. That's pretty impressive. Keep it coming.
Well, we don't have it yet, but we're no pun intended. We're on the road. We're on the right road.
Well, we had nothing before you started, so we're a lot closer to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that people don't really understand is how much work you all have to put in to make sure that money comes to Milford and not one of the other 300 towns that will fight for it.
Sure. Sure.
So again, thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to hearing new stories in 90 days.
Whenever you want, just give me a holler. I always love to sit down and chat with you.
Sounds great.
All right.
And to our now tonight, Mrs. DeWitt, our director's wife, is watching, so we could be up to 7 people. She wanted to meet the famous Brian Murray or to listen. So she's in the back studio with Brent, our director, who makes all this happen, listening to what you were going to say or what you did say.
Wonderful.
So good night, all. As always, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better day than today. Good night.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just